Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jeffrey Epstein Show. I'm your host, Bobbycapucci, and this is Daily Drop number 112. Happy Friday, everyone. We are there. It is Friday evening. Hopefully, you're all off of work and preparing for your weekend. Me, I've been thinking a little bit about the hacked or supposed hacked Ghislaine Maxwell emails. And, I don't trust anything that this lady does at this point. She's very shrewd, and she loves to obfuscate and throw smoke screens. That is just the way she rolls. That's how she learned under her father's wing with all of those other very shrewd people that she grew up around. And everything was always an operation to them, it seems. So I think Ghislaine Maxwell, what's going on here, the goal is to say that her emails were hacked. But in reality, what she's really trying to do is behind the scenes exert pressure on the people whose names might be in those emails so that they in turn exert pressure to get her out of this jam. And I think it's a last ditch Hail Mary for her. And I think she's running out of options. And of course, folks, again, this is just my theory of what's going on. I don't have any evidence to back this theory up, but I think it's something that needs to be talked about and something we need to think about because we really can't believe anything Ghislaine Maxwell says on its face. Everything's a stunt with her. Every little thing is a stunt, and we've seen it over and over. So I'm operating on the theory that it is not what it seems, it's not what it is on its face, and that Maxwell is just posturing here and trying to exert whatever little power she still has left over these people. And everyone who's been listening to this podcast understands what I mean by that. What I mean by that is this was a blackmail operation from the very beginning, in my opinion. It was a blackmail operation from the very beginning, and it exploded to heights that they never expected. So once it got to those heights, obviously it became much more advanced. And once they started snaring princes and ex-presidents and ex-governors and huge business moguls and academics, it launched into a whole nother atmosphere. And we see where it went. We see the decades of terror that it was left in its wake, right? All of these girls that were abused, all of these girls that were used as a means to an end for these sick people. And it's just gross, right? It's gross to think about. It's gross to think that intelligence agencies here or anywhere else would be engaged in something like this. And unfortunately, folks, that's exactly where the evidence leads. And all of this is going to tie right into the article we're going to talk about tonight. There's an article out from The Sun, and it's by, they're talking to Steve Hoffenberg in it. And Steve Hoffenberg was Jeffrey Epstein's ex-partner, the guy who got arrested and did 18 years for a Ponzi scheme that, again, Epstein skated on. Ask yourself, folks, how did he skate on all of this stuff? I mean, can it all just be coincidence around Jeffrey Epstein? Everything of his life has been a coincidence from the very beginning? Or is there something much more sinister going on here? I tend to believe that there's just way too much coincidence here, right? Way too much coincidence for anyone to ignore it, and certainly way too much coincidence for us to believe the narrative that they're throwing, especially when we keep hearing the claims that we're going to hear in this article. All right, if you'd like to contact me, you can do that at bobbycapucci@protonmail.com. That's BOBBYCAPUCCI@protonmail.com. This article is by The Sun, and the authors are Emma Parry and Chris White. It was published today, January 24th at 3:46 p.m. I'm guessing that's English time, whatever standard time that is. Headline: Spy claims. Jeffrey Epstein boasted he was selling Prince Andrew's secrets to a Mossad spy and called him a Super Bowl trophy. Well, we all know that Jeffrey Epstein has said that he has ties to intelligence going all the way back to the old days, to the 80s. And we all know that he had an Austrian passport that is almost impossible to get a hold of, right? So there's a lot of there are legs definitely here when he talks about he was in intelligence. It's not something that you can just dismiss, especially when you look at everything in context and not just in a vacuum. Like I always say, if this was just one thing, a one-off, maybe Jeffrey Epstein was just a boastful jerk, right? He obviously was, but maybe that was all he was, and he just liked to tell tall tales. Oh, I worked for the government, I was a secret agent, blah, 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 blah. If it was just that, then we could say, okay, whatever, and discount it. But everything added up, and the fact that Acosta told the Trump transition team that Epstein was controlled by intelligence and it was, he was told hands off. When you add everything up, boy, it does not look good for those who want to claim that there's no ties here, right? The evidence is what needs to be believed, not the narrative. Stephen Hoffenberg also claimed Epstein met Prince Andrew years earlier. Jeffrey Epstein would boast to his pals that he was selling the Duke of York's secrets to Israeli intelligence agency Mossad, his former mentor has claimed. Stephen Hoffenberg also claims Epstein met Prince Andrew years earlier than the royal says their friendship began, and used to talk of the prince as his Super Bowl trophy. Well, we know that. We know that Prince Andrew was a huge get for Jeffrey Epstein and for the operation, and we know for a fact that he used that relationship with Andrew as a conduit to gain more respect and to get his claws dug in a little bit deeper into the upper crust of society. We know that. Hoffenberg and Epstein criminally masterminded one of the biggest Ponzi schemes in history, fraudulently ripping off investors of nearly $500 million in the late 80s and early 90s until their scam was busted by the FBI. Again, how did Epstein skate on this? How the hell did he skate on this? It's interesting to think, right? That Hoffenberg does 18 years, and for financial crimes, by the way. And Jeffrey Epstein did 13 months for what he did. Also served no time whatsoever over this, and was able to go on and take over Les Wexner's fortune. So Les Wexner had no idea that Epstein was involved with Hoffenberg. Les Wexner had no idea that Epstein was a sick, demented pervert. He had no idea about anything, huh? How could somebody who is supposedly so smart be so stupid, folks? I don't think he is stupid. I think he knew exactly what was going on. As I've said before, that's my opinion. I believe that all of these people that tell, I had no idea what he was up to. I mean, come on. Stop it. Just stop it right now. All the way back here when he was with Hoffenberg. Why would you be hanging out with somebody that embezzled billions of dollars anyway? All right? I mean, come on. In an exclusive interview, Hoffenberg says he is revealing the 75% about Epstein that no one else has ever told before, claiming, "I'm the only eyewitness who can tell what Epstein said about the intelligence, rapes, and finances." Now, again, we have to remember this is Hoffenberg, a convicted felon. How much of what he says is true or not, I don't know. I've never met the man. I've never had a chance to sit down with him. I've never had a chance to vet him. But what I will tell you is this: it matches up with what we've heard from a lot of other people, right? We've heard a lot from the ex-spy Ari Ben-Menashe. We've heard from him that these guys were spies. We've heard it from several well-placed sources. So if we're taking Hoffenberg on his word, well, Jeffrey Epstein was in deep, folks. In very, very, very deep. Hoffenberg, a born-again Christian who is helping in the legal cases of Epstein's rape victims, said Epstein's alleged madam, Ghislaine Maxwell, and co-conspirator, and friendly pedophile, and fellow sick, disgusting human being, introduced the disgraced financier, pedophile, to the prince in the early 90s, years earlier than 1999, which is when the prince claims they met. Well, we know that as a fact as well. We know that it was a lot earlier than it was first mentioned. I forget where we heard that before, but we've definitely heard that. So that's definitely, that passes muster here with Mr. Hoffenberg. So definitely not telling fibs there. So, maybe he's credible about the rest of this stuff. But what I will tell you is this: in the overall picture, this is just another story that's telling the same exact tale, right? We keep hearing the same exact thing over and over about Jeffrey Epstein. And a guy like Hoffenberg, who is so close to him, who has really nothing to gain at this point, I would think, right? What does he have to gain? Epstein's dead. He's already done his time. He's not in trouble for anything. He's not looking to make a deal with the government. Maybe he feels guilty. Maybe he decided that, hey, look, I feel like I had a part in this and I want to come clean. Do I have any proof that's what's going on? No idea. I'm just speculating. But what he has to say, when looked at in the bigger picture, it definitely runs concurrent to what we know already. Epstein was a bragger, a boaster, Hoffenberg told The Sun. Well, I can confirm that. My sources already, the sources I've talked to have said the same thing about Epstein. A big boaster, big bragger, and nowhere near as smart as he thought he was. He always explained to me that what he was up to. He acquired his first royal connection in the early 90s. He told me about it. He got it from Ghislaine Maxwell and used it substantially. That was the Super Bowl to him. It was the most important relationship to him. Epstein did meet Prince Andrew around 1991. This was said to me by Epstein. Epstein was very pleased with meeting the prince, and it was in the UK. Epstein knew he could manipulate Andrew. That's a solid fact. Epstein's ability to manipulate was extraordinary. If he wanted to, he could have been the president of the United States. Andrew respected Epstein highly and was tremendously impressed, so that's what made him vulnerable to Epstein. This was a trophy friendship. It was his strongest bond, even more than Clinton's. So I don't know if I believe that. I think that Clinton was his biggest coup d'etat for him, I guess you would say. I think that in his mind anyway. He had a lot to say about Clinton being a political animal and, when Clinton walked in a room, blah, blah, blah. I think Andrew was more of a vehicle for him and more of a pawn and more of just a figurehead. But I could be wrong about that. Obviously, I have no intimate knowledge of their relationships. That's just what I take away from it when I look at the two of them. I mean, there's a picture of Bill Clinton in a dress on his wall, for God's sake. So, what the heck. Prince Andrew has always denied any wrongdoing and played down the extent of his friendship with Andrew. The Sun reached out to a representative from Maxwell and Buckingham Palace for comment. The 74-year-old widower who now lives in Connecticut claims that Epstein told him about his blackmail plots, which became even more sophisticated, especially when Maxwell became involved. Well, we know that. We know from everything that we've covered so far that Ghislaine Maxwell was the brains in the operation, right? The one who had the plans. Jeffrey Epstein was the vehicle, and she used the vehicle to get where they wanted to go. And it worked perfectly for them. It filled Jeffrey Epstein's sick, dark, disgusting proclivities, while at the same time fulfilling the needs of the agents that were running them. Cameras were set up in all of his houses, his private plane nicknamed the Lolita Express, and Epstein threw parties for high-profile friends, providing a roster of younger, underage women, Hoffenberg said. Hoffenberg, who attended some of these parties, says that any recordings and information was used for financial gain and also given to the Mossad, the feared Israeli intelligence service. And don't be fooled, folks. The Mossad is powerful and all, but don't think for a minute that the Mossad was running this operation in America without the CIA's consent. The CIA had their hands on this as well. There is no doubt, I highly, highly, highly doubt that the Mossad was running this sort of operation in this country without the CIA knowing. We're talking about the same people that scoop up every bit of metadata going out, folks, all right? These people knew exactly what was going on, and the CIA probably gave them their consent because the CIA was probably benefiting from it as well. So I don't want to, I know that definitely that Ghislaine Maxwell was certainly involved with the Mossad. There is no doubt about it. But the CIA is not going to get off the hook here, folks. If you don't think they're running operations in America, which goes against their charter and which is illegal, think again. These people are heavily involved in what's going on in America. Heavily involved. He told me that Ghislaine Maxwell was going to be the breakthrough to bring him into that orbit, to be able to be part of the agency in Israel, and that's what did occur, he said. They created the plan of installing the honeypot cameras and had taken over the house in Manhattan, given to him by his billionaire buddy Les Wexner, to blackmail the politicians. And this is what we were going on from the very beginning, right? This is what we were talking about from the very beginning. This is the sort of operation that the Mossad and the CIA has run in the Middle East forever. What they would do is they'd catch up some sort of imam or a holy man in some sort of sex scheme, and then they'd threaten to out him unless he started ratting on his compatriots. And they just took it up a whole another level, and the sophistication became a whole nother level of sophisticated when they started running it here in the States. But they had the blueprint already on what to work with from their previous operations. He then took over the house in Florida and put in cameras. The cameras were to record rapes. It wasn't just about gathering intelligence, but compromising the politicians. When he befriended Andrew, he had a deal with the Israelis to gather the intelligence and information from people who Epstein took into his homes and his plane. Again, this is a perfect operation from an agent standpoint, from a handler standpoint. This is a gift sent from heaven, right? Have a guy like Jeffrey Epstein, a billionaire, with someone like Ghislaine Maxwell, who has the in to that sort of society. Pair them together and set them loose on the higher crust of society in New York, for starters. Get them ensconced inside of that world, and then they'll have not only the shroud of protection of the agency, but they'll have the credibility of rolling in those circles. And all of those enablers that gave them that credibility should be ashamed of themselves, folks, because at the end of the day, that's exactly what occurred. I remember Andrew was at many of his events when he took over the house in Manhattan. That was in the early years. He got tremendous power and influence from Ghislaine, using that intelligence to socially climb with Trump, Clinton, and Andrew. Andrew didn't understand he was being used. He's a royal, so doesn't look at that. He would discuss tactics with me, speaking of Andrew as a trophy, a tremendous friend, and benefit in his social network. He'd brag about it. It was a big, big, big issue with him. Of course it was, right? What could be more of a feather in your cap as a manipulator, as a man who's running an operation? Not only have you caught up some mid-level politicians, some businessmen, now you have a Prince of England caught up. Talk about power. So you could exert your power through him. Now he is just another pawn in your game. You have compromising information about this man that he doesn't want to get out. There is no lengths that this man will not go to make you happy. So much so that he flew from London to New York to break up with Jeffrey Epstein. Break up with Jeffrey Epstein? What sort of man, never mind a prince, hops on a plane, flies overseas to break up with his buddy? Not somebody that's not being blackmailed, folks. Not somebody that's not owned, folks. Not somebody that a dossier has not been compiled on, folks. All right? Look. We all understand that Andrew was completely compromised by Epstein at this point. There's no doubt in my mind. Virginia Roberts' story definitely checks out. When you break it down and you look at it skeptically even, there are not many holes in this young lady's story, folks. And Andrew's story, on the other hand, is complete garbage. If I was a juror and they brought this case before me, I would laugh Andrew out of court. Let's be honest. His defense is absolutely pathetic. And we know what's going on here, folks, all right? We know that Jeffrey Epstein set this all into motion. Andrew got caught up in the honeypot. Then Andrew was owned. From then on, Jeffrey Epstein was calling the shots. This guy, Andrew, was seduced by Epstein, totally overwhelmed by him, so impressed with his authority and his way of life, his fast lane. He is one of a kind of people. Clinton was brilliant with people, but Epstein was far above that level. Andrew had a weakness for the girls and fast life. Epstein provided that fantasy. Andrew would then give intelligence that Epstein would give to Israel. This was happening when I was working with Epstein. There you go, folks. Another direct source who worked with Epstein on the ground, knows of him intimately, worked with him for years, helped him build some of his fortune, is saying that Epstein was, in fact, an agent for Mossad. So, it comes down to this, folks. Do you believe Hoffenberg? Do you believe what he has to say? Hoffenberg is considered Epstein's original mentor after making him his right-hand man while he was CEO of the collection agency Towers Financial Corporation in the mid-'80s. Hoffenberg says Epstein was living in London at the time, working for British arms dealer Douglas Leese after being fired by the U.S. investment bank Bear Stearns for a deal that went wrong. And we all know Douglas Leese was involved in the Iran-Contra affair, and Douglas Leese was involved in all sorts of arms trading. So another guy that is questionable at best. He says Epstein, who was found dead in his cell last year awaiting trial for sex trafficking, came to him broke, and together they made hundreds of millions working on a Ponzi scheme to siphon off company funds instead of paying investors. Sounds about right. That sounds like a Jeffrey Epstein move. After an FBI bust in 1995, Hoffenberg pleaded guilty to mail fraud, tax evasion, and obstruction of justice, and was sentenced to 20 years, serving 18, while Epstein escaped punishment. Like he always did, like he always does. He didn't have the millions when he met me. That's why he used me as a vehicle to the millions. I was part of his plan. He was like the mastermind chess player Bobby Fischer, always 12 steps in front of everyone. He had no moral compass. He had no boundaries in his thinking. He was a truly unusual person. He didn't think based on the rules. The rules never applied to him in our conversations. thousands of them every week. He only strategized how to get around the rules with me. So Hoffenberg is saying here that Epstein was a very important and crucial part of his scheme and his plot. And again, it shows you that for some reason, Epstein would get off for the same exact crimes that Hoffenberg was committing. But Hoffenberg, on the other hand, well, he did 18 years. The two-tiered justice system smacking you in the face, folks. And Hoffenberg was rich to boot. Imagine what kind of chance you would stand if the federal government came after you. Boy, oh boy, it would be a rough road, wouldn't it? He discussed blackmailing, how he would get information that he could use for intelligence. We discussed it at length. He was brainstorming ideas that he could gather information, read people for their weaknesses, so that he could get them to like him right away and make us even more money. That was on his radar, to be liked instantly. His mindset was seduction of people. Yeah, we know that. Another thing that we know from Epstein, he would get introduced into these circles and then he'd worm his way in with his charisma. I guess he was charming. He had a lot of charisma, but I still don't believe he was smart. Okay, folks, I don't believe he was smart like some of these people say. He was a faker. He was one of these fakers, and that's why he was always involved with the scientists and stuff as well. He wanted to be seen as somebody who was ultra smart. He was so cunning and had a dynamic personality. He did blackmail in the most charming fashion. He made it comfortable for people to break the rules, as if it's a normal commodity. He made it normal for everyone on Wall Street to break rules. That's how he was able to convince me. He could get under the skin of anyone and manipulated some of the most important people in the world. Hoffenberg says he is speaking out as he is helping to seek justice for Epstein's victims. Since his release, he claims to have assisted in recovering $200 million to companies affected by his Ponzi scheme and is in touch with the rape victims who leaned on him to help understand Epstein better. While Buckingham Palace declined to comment on Hoffenberg's claims, Prince Andrew did say in a BBC interview he met Epstein in 1999. He also claimed they were not close and didn't spend much time together. Boy, sounds like everybody in America too. Meanwhile, there's pictures and documented proof that they all spent oodles of time together. Look, again, folks, it comes down to Hoffenberg. Do you believe what he has to say? I think that it fits with what we've heard from other sources, right? I think that it fits with the general narrative that these guys were working a blackmail operation. And what it does is it just adds a little bit more meat to the bone, a little more context to the story. Another person going on record and saying, hey, this is what it was. So with that said, folks, we're going to cut it here, and I will be back tomorrow with the usual. All right, everybody, I hope you all have a fantastic Friday night. And if you'd like to contact me, you can do that at bobbycapucci@protonmail.com. That's BOBBYCAPUCCI@protonmail.com. If you would like to help support the podcast, you can do that by clicking on the GoFundMe link inside of the description box. All right, everybody, have a great night.